Around 3.9 million years ago, long before written language, civilization, or even the first flicker of organized thought, early hominids wandered the vast savannas of East Africa. Their lives were dominated by survival, food, shelter, danger, yet hidden within their gestures, murmurs, and movements may have been the earliest sparks of spiritual awareness. These first beings, often dismissed as primitive, were quietly exploring something profound, the possibility of communicating with forces beyond the visible, sending messages that transcend time. Archaeological evidence, stone marks, clustered bones, patterns of repeated gathering, suggests these early humans acted with intention. Every carefully chosen placement of a stone, every synchronized movement with their peers, every shared moment by the light of dawn hints at the birth of symbolic thought. Perhaps in the beating of stones together, or the rhythm of their footsteps, they were not merely coordinating survival. They were experimenting with connection, trying to speak a language that went beyond words. Could these first acts of ritual, rhythm, and pattern be the first prayers humanity ever sent into the universe? Imagine a small group sitting beneath an acacia tree as the sun dipped below the horizon. One hominid taps two stones together, another follows. Slowly, the sound becomes a heartbeat outside the body, a shared vibration that unites them. They do not know why they are doing it, yet they feel something. A presence, an awareness, a recognition of life beyond the tangible. Perhaps this was the first attempt to reach the unseen, to send messages across time, to warn future generations of the mysteries that bind all life. The mystery of these first messages is not found in words, but in intention and feeling. A deep intuition may have driven them. The universe is alive, and life is interconnected. Their signals were subtle, yet enduring, echoes of consciousness that ripple through millions of years. To reach us, could they have been warning us? Or inviting us to remember that life, connection, and spirit are inseparable? If this ancient whisper resonates with you, leave a like to honor their memory and share your thoughts in the comments. What do you think the first humans were trying to tell us? Stay with me as the next revelation dives even deeper, exploring the delicate bridge between body and spirit. Somewhere between instinct and awareness, the Australopithecus afarensis took its first trembling steps into consciousness. These beings, small, upright, and curious, lived not just in the physical realm of survival, but on the threshold of an invisible transformation. With each sunrise over the Ethiopian highlands, they observed, imitated, and began to feel. In those early sensations, fear, awe, longing, something within them started to awaken, the recognition of self, and with it, the mystery of spirit. When we picture Lucy, the famous fossilized member of this species, we often see bones, not emotion. But behind those bones was a being who noticed patterns in the sky, sounds in the earth, movements in the wind. Science tells us she walked upright. Spirituality suggests she looked upward, not merely to navigate the world, but to understand her place in it. The very act of standing on 2 feet may have altered the flow of perception, from earthbound creature to sky-seeking soul. The evolution of posture wasn't just a physical leap, it was symbolic. By freeing the hands, Australopithecus could touch, shape, and gesture. Those gestures became the first carriers of intention. A raised hand could warn, a soft touch could comfort, a rhythmic movement could unite. These were not yet words, but the seeds of empathy. Perhaps through these motions, they began to sense a shared energy, what we might call the early pulse of collective spirit. As groups formed and cooperation deepened, another layer emerged, the emotional bond. Mourning the dead, protecting the young, sharing food, these actions hinted at the dawn of moral consciousness. For the first time, life was not just about living, but about meaning. Every action, Every gaze, every silence carried a whisper of purpose. Could it be that the Australopithecus afarensis was the first to feel the echo of a greater design, a cosmic invitation to awareness? They stood as the bridge between matter and meaning, between body and breath. Their message may not have been spoken, but it still hums in our DNA, that to stand upright is to reach for the divine, to evolve not just in form, but in spirit. Stay close. In the next chapter, we'll uncover how fire became more than survival. It became the first spiritual flame, a beacon of consciousness in the dark. Long before civilization, long before language shaped our thoughts, there was the flicker of fire, a trembling light that turned night into mystery. For the early hominids, discovering fire was not just a triumph of survival. It was an initiation. To hold fire was to hold something alive, unpredictable and sacred. It hissed, whispered, danced. It consumed, yet gave life. Around those glowing embers, something extraordinary began. Ritual. Imagine the first time a bolt of lightning set a tree ablaze. Fear and fascination must have mingled in equal measure. Some fled, but a few, the curious ones, drew closer, risking the unknown. They watched the flames devour the branches, transforming matter into energy. In that transformation, they may have sensed a truth far beyond survival, that death could create light, that endings could give birth to beginnings. It was their first lesson in spirituality, delivered by the fire itself. As these beings learned to control fire, their nights changed forever. The darkness, once filled with predators and silence, became a place of gathering. They sat in circles, shadows dancing across their faces, and something ancient stirred. Connection. Around the fire they shared food, gestures, emotions. They began to perform. Rhythmic movements, chant-like sounds. The fire wasn't just warmth, it was witness. It became the center of ceremony, the first altar in human history. Some anthropologists believe these early rituals were the root of storytelling and religion. Each spark, each flame reflected a cosmic mirror, the human spirit recognizing its own capacity to create and destroy. Fire became a teacher. It showed them that transformation was possible, that what exists in one form can be reborn in another. It was the embodiment of consciousness itself, always moving, never still, consuming yet illuminating. In those moments, perhaps the first hominids began to sense that they were more than flesh, that within them burned a similar flame, invisible but eternal. When they danced, they weren't merely celebrating survival. They were participating in the rhythm of the universe, echoing a divine pulse that connected all life. Could it be that fire was the first message from the cosmos, a reminder that light lives within us, waiting to be awakened? Through its glow, they saw their own reflection, and for the first time, recognized the sacred in themselves. The story doesn't end at the firelight. Next, we follow the rhythm of those flames into motion, into sound, art, and dance, where the first true language of spirit was born. After fire, another transformation began, not of matter, but of meaning. The early humans started to see patterns everywhere, in the cracks of stone, the flow of rivers, the songs of wind through grass. Slowly, they began to respond. Their movements, their voices, their markings on rock, all became symbols. From these gestures, the first spiritual language was born, a universal code that needed no words, only rhythm and intention. The earliest engravings on stones and bones were not mere decorations. They were maps of thought, attempts to capture the invisible. Spirals, lines, and dots repeated in mysterious sequences hinted at cycles of life, death, seasons, and stars. These primitive symbols might have been humanity's first prayers, drawn with trembling hands that sensed the presence of something greater watching. To mark a stone was to declare, I was here, I saw, I understood. But the most powerful expressions weren't carved, they were performed. The human body became the first instrument, the first canvas. Beating hands on hollow wood, stamping feet on earth, voices echoing against. Cave walls, each sound, each movement carried intention. When several moved together, their hearts aligned. The group became one organism, breathing in rhythm, vibrating as one. That unity was more than ritual, it was transcendence. They didn't yet have gods, but they had connection, a sacred energy felt rather than explained. Through these acts, early humans discovered something profound. Creation was an act of communication with the cosmos. To dance was to honor life. To sing was to shape reality. The boundaries between body, spirit, and environment blurred. Every sound carried power, every motion meaning. They weren't just expressing, they were invoking. Perhaps, in those moments of collective trance, the first messages of spirit passed through them, not from one to another, but from the universe itself. The rhythm became revelation, the dance became dialogue, the sound became memory. And maybe that's why, even today, we still dance when words fail us. We hum when we're moved. We draw symbols when we seek meaning. Those ancient instincts whisper through our DNA. The language of spirit never died. It simply evolved. Now we step deeper into the silence, where bones, stones, and fossils hide the next chapter of the human soul. Stay with me as we uncover what the remains of our ancestors were truly trying to tell us. Beneath the soil of ancient Africa, scattered among layers of forgotten time, lie the bones of beings who once looked at the sky and wondered. To the modern scientist, these fossils are data, calcium and sediment, carbon and measure. But to those who listen beyond science, these remains are messages. Silent, but not mute. The posture of a body, the placement of a skull, the careful arrangement of stones, all whisper of something sacred, the birth of belief. Archaeologists have found evidence suggesting that even early hominids showed an awareness of death. Some bodies were covered with red ochre, a pigment resembling blood, as if symbolically giving life back to the earth. Others were buried with objects, stones or food offerings. These gestures cannot be explained by instinct alone. They imply intention, and behind intention, emotion. To care for the dead is to acknowledge the invisible. To bury with ceremony is to believe in continuity beyond the flesh. Fear, too, played its part. The unknown darkness of death must have haunted early minds. Yet instead of fleeing from it, they sought to understand it. That search, that trembling curiosity, became the seed of spirituality. Each burial, each ritual act of remembrance, was an answer to an ancient question. Does something of us remain? The silence of bones became a dialogue between the living and the unseen. Even the way fossils are discovered today feels guided by destiny. They appear at moments when humanity most needs to remember its roots, as if the earth itself is unearthing her own messages. Every fossil carries not just the story of evolution, but of emotion. A skull tilted upward suggests wonder. A hand resting across a chest suggests love. A circle of remains hints at community, perhaps the first congregation in history. What if these ancient beings weren't just evolving biologically but spiritually? What if, buried within their gestures toward the dead, there was a coded message to their distant descendants, to us? Maybe they wanted to remind us that fear of death is also proof of life's depth. That belief was never about knowing, but about feeling the unseen currents that connect us all. The bones do not speak, yet they echo louder than words. Consciousness began not in temples, but in graves, in the recognition that even silence has a soul. From the stillness of the earth, our ancestors looked up once more. In the next revelation, we follow their gaze to the stars, where they first sensed the cosmic rhythm guiding all life. When night fell over the ancient plains and the fires dimmed to embers, our ancestors lifted their gaze toward the infinite. There, scattered across the velvet darkness, were points of light that pulsed like distant memories. For the early humans, the sky was not a void. It was alive, breathing with mystery. Every flicker, every movement, every disappearance of a star carried meaning. They didn't have astronomy yet, but they had awe, and awe was the first form of devotion. Some of the oldest rock engravings show patterns that mirror constellations, coincidence perhaps, or evidence of the first skywatchers. The same beings who once painted their caves and buried their dead began to trace cosmic order above. They followed the rhythm of the moon, the turning of the stars, the way shadows changed with the seasons. In doing so, they found something profound. The heavens moved in harmony. That discovery was not only scientific, it was spiritual. To them, the stars were not distant spheres of gas. They were ancestors, guardians, eyes of the universe watching over the earth. Imagine them gathered on a cool night, silent, breathing in unison as one pointed upward. A comet streaks across the horizon, fear, then wonder. The tribe murmurs, gestures made toward the heavens, perhaps asking for guidance or forgiveness. These moments became the foundation of the sacred, the realization that the world above and the world below were connected, that the pattern of the cosmos echoed the pattern of the soul. The stars became storytellers. Their rising and setting marked time, seasons, for birth, for harvest, for migration. Through these cycles, early humans learned patience, anticipation, reverence. They began to live not against nature, but within it. And with every new night, they felt more certain. The universe was not random. It was rhythmic, intelligent, aware. Some anthropologists suggest that this celestial awareness planted the earliest seeds of religion. But perhaps it was simpler. Not belief, but belonging. Looking at the stars, our ancestors saw themselves reflected in the vastness, realizing that consciousness was not confined to flesh. The sky was a mirror, and through it, they remembered who they were, fragments of the same eternal light. Could it be that their upward gaze was more than curiosity, that it was a plea? A message sent through time, reminding us not to forget the cosmic rhythm we were born from. The stars they watched are the same that watch us now, silently repeating their message. Remember your origin, and you will find your destiny. The story continues not in the heavens, but upon the earth, where spirit and nature merged in one sacred bond. Join me as we uncover how the first humans saw their souls reflected in the animals around them. After fire, art, and stars, our ancestors began to see themselves mirrored in the living world around them. Every creature, every movement, every sound carried meaning. The early humans lived not beside nature, but within it, an invisible dialogue connecting body, earth, and spirit. From that connection emerged one of the oldest spiritual revelations in human history, the belief that animals were not separate from us, but sacred extensions of the same consciousness, the dawn of totemism. Imagine a hunter following the track of a gazelle at sunrise. The air is still, his breath shallow, his heart racing not only with the desire to survive, but with reverence. He watches how the animal moves, graceful, alert, pure. In that moment, he doesn't just see prey, he sees a teacher. The gazelle's instincts, its awareness, its harmony with the land, all reflect qualities he wishes to embody. Over time, the animal becomes more than symbol, it becomes spirit. Through this sacred mirroring, humans began to sense that life itself was a conversation between forms of the same divine essence. Totemism was not mythology, it was relationship. The lion taught courage, the serpent transformation, the bird transcendence. These were not metaphors, they were living truths. When early humans painted animals on cave walls, they weren't creating art for decoration, they were invoking presence. Each image was an act of communion, an attempt to call forth the soul of the creature and merge with it. Through ritual dances, mimicry, and chants, they celebrated the unity between species, acknowledging that all life shared one breath, one heartbeat of the earth. This worldview shaped everything. To kill without gratitude was taboo. To waste was sin. Every action required balance. Every death required prayer. Through animals, they learned the law of reciprocity, that to take was to give, and to harm was to wound oneself. They lived by sacred exchange, guided by respect rather than dominance. Modern society may see this as superstition, but perhaps it was a deeper understanding of reality, one we have forgotten. The early humans recognized that consciousness wasn't confined to the human skull. It flowed through rivers, forests, and the eyes of every creature that walked the earth. To look into an animal's gaze was to glimpse another version of the divine. Maybe the message they left for us is simple yet profound, that we are not masters of creation, but participants in its eternal rhythm. When we destroy nature, we silence a part of our own spirit. But when we listen, truly listen, the animals still speak. And their language, like our ancestors, is love. From the eyes of the beasts, our ancestors turned once more to the earth itself, to the stones that sang and the mountains that echoed with hidden messages. In the next revelation, we'll uncover how the land itself became their spiritual voice. Long before written words, the earth itself spoke, through vibration, echo, and resonance. Our ancestors listened. They placed their hands on the cool surfaces of caves, on boulders cracked by time, and felt a subtle hum beneath their skin. To them, stone was not inert matter. It was alive, ancient, and wise. In the echoes of their footsteps and the rhythm of their tools striking rock, they began to sense a hidden language, the voice of the planet itself. Across continents, ancient peoples carved and arranged stones in patterns that defy mere practicality. Circles, alignments, pillars. Each structure seemed to respond to the movement of the sun, the moon, or the stars. These were not random acts of architecture. They were acts of listening. Through stone, early humans sought harmony with the earth's pulse. When a drumbeat echoed through a cave, or when a voice sang into stone walls, the sound returned transformed, deeper, richer, sacred. In those resonances, they heard what we might call the divine frequency. Perhaps they believed the earth was conscious, that every mountain, every valley, every river carried memory. To touch stone was to touch time. In that tactile communion, they felt connected to all who came before them and all who would follow. The carvings and markings we find today, spirals, serpents, hands, are not simply art. They are transcriptions of communication with the unseen world, energy translated into form. Stone became the first sacred text. Some modern researchers believe ancient people used vibration intentionally, creating sound within megalithic structures to induce altered states of awareness. If so, these sites were not just monuments, they were instruments. The earth was the symphony, and humanity its first conscious listener. When wind moved through cracks or water, dripped rhythmically in caves, it was as if the planet was breathing, whispering messages to those who could still hear. Over millennia, as technology advanced, that ancient listening faded. We built walls that silenced the earth's music. Yet the stones remain, still humming with the memory of our earliest communion. If we pressed our ears against them today, perhaps we would hear what our ancestors heard. Not words, but feeling, the sound of belonging, the vibration of being. maybe the message they left us through stone is timeless, that we are never disconnected from the earth. Every heartbeat is an echo of her core, every breath a continuation of her whisper. The voice of the earth has never gone silent. Humanity has merely forgotten how to listen. As the stones sang and the earth whispered, a new kind of connection emerged, one that transcended distance itself. In the next revelation, we'll explore the mysterious idea that the first conscious beings may have shared thoughts, without words, through the language of the mind. Before the invention of words, before the first sounds carried meaning, there may have been a different kind of connection, one that needed no speech at all. Some researchers of consciousness propose that early humans, and perhaps even their hominid ancestors, shared emotions and intentions directly through a silent, energetic field that bound them together. Was this merely instinct, or something greater, an ancient form of telepathy born from unity rather than separation? Picture a small group of early beings moving through the savannah. One senses danger, a predator hidden in the grass, and the others turn, almost simultaneously, without a word. No sound, no gesture, just awareness. This kind of synchronized behavior, still seen in flocks of birds and schools of fish, may have once been humanity's native state. Consciousness wasn't confined to the individual mind. It was shared, like ripples in water spreading from one drop to another. Through this invisible web, they felt what others felt: fear, hunger, joy, peace. In the beginning, communication was not about transferring information, but about feeling together. They did not talk about unity. They were unity. The barrier between I and you had not yet solidified. Modern humans call it empathy, intuition, or collective awareness, echoes of something we once lived by instinct. Some spiritual traditions suggest this was the original human condition, a state of oneness later lost when ego and language divided perception. If we imagine that consciousness itself is a frequency, then perhaps these early beings were tuned to the same channel. When one discovered a new source of food, others somehow knew. When one suffered, others felt the disturbance. Their connection was not through sound, but through vibration. The same resonance that once bound humans to the earth and the stars. This might explain why so many ancient myths describe humanity's fall as a loss of connection, not a gain of knowledge. Telepathic communication in this sense wasn't supernatural, it was natural. It was the purest form of empathy, born from a world where separation didn't yet exist. Over time, as language developed, words replaced vibration. Communication became external, and the silence between minds deepened. Yet traces of that forgotten ability still linger. We sense when someone stares at us. We feel others' emotions before they speak. We just know things, without explanation. These are fragments of that original network, the invisible lines of the first human consciousness. Maybe our ancestors weren't warning us of danger, but of disconnection. They wanted us to remember that thought itself is sacred, that every mind influences every other. In that awareness lies our forgotten truth. We were never meant to live in isolation, but as one vast field of living thought. And now, as we approach the final revelation, we return to the beginning, to the question that echoes through time. What were the first hominids trying to tell us? Their cosmic warning may not be lost, only waiting to be heard again. Across millions of years, through stone and fire, through song and silence, the message has been waiting. The first hominids, fragile, curious, awakening, may not have had language, but they had awareness. They looked at the stars, felt the pulse of the earth, and sensed a truth that modern humanity has almost forgotten, that everything is connected, and consciousness is the thread that weaves it all together. Their warning was never spoken aloud. It was encoded in the way they lived, in how they moved through the world, with reverence, balance, and belonging. The early humans understood something we now struggle to remember. They knew that to harm the land was to wound themselves, that to kill without gratitude broke the invisible bond of life. That silence was not emptiness, but presence. Their rituals, their carvings, their careful burials, all were acts of remembrance, reminders that the visible world was only a shadow of something far greater. They lived inside a sacred network, earth, sky, spirit and flesh, all breathing in rhythm. Perhaps their message was never meant to predict catastrophe, but to prevent it. They saw cycles of birth and decay, of abundance and loss, and understood that imbalance leads to suffering. What they feared most was not death, but forgetting. Forgetting that light and shadow are parts of the same dance. Forgetting that the fire within mirrors the fire of the stars. Forgetting that every action ripples outward through time. Now, as our species stands on the edge of technological and ecological collapse, their ancient warning becomes clear. If we separate from the sacred, we destroy ourselves. The same instincts that once guided them toward harmony now echo faintly in us, in our longing for peace, our search for meaning, our ache for connection. The whisper of our ancestors still moves through the wind, through the soil, through the heartbeat that drums within every living being. They are not gone. They are the pulse beneath our cities, the hum inside our bones, the quiet intuition that tells us when something is wrong. And if we listen, truly listen, we might still hear what they were trying to tell us. That evolution was never just about survival. It was about awakening. The first hominids were not primitive. They were the first dreamers of the human soul, the first keepers of the eternal flame. Their cosmic warning remains simple, timeless, and urgent. Remember who you are. Remember that consciousness is the universe remembering itself, and that the destiny of humanity is not domination, but reunion. If this ancient message has awakened something in you, stay with this journey, and let their voices guide you home through the silence of time.